Yes. Beautiful cacophony of birdsong around me. I've got cuckoos. That's about where it ends. You know me with my bird calls. I really, really have got to spend some time learning them. Right, let me take a sketchbook photograph just to start the day. Oh, the sunshine. Did I make a mistake in wearing my fleece, pups? I think you possibly did. Right, a photograph back along the path. Got my X100 with me today, my X100V. Here we go, 1400 shutter speed, f5.6, ISO 160, and there we go.
To be in a place that I don't fully understand, that I can't take for granted because I don't know the forms, I don't know the customs, I don't know the language. Maybe I'm just a really curious person, and it's the things with which I am familiar at home that just, they don't excite me the way exploring a new culture or a place that I've been many times and I'm digging deep on, that I just find so fascinating because of the differences. But at some point, we all will run out of room. We will run out of time, and it will not be to the sharpest photograph to which we look back and say, oh, that's, that was the highlight of my life, was one, award that I won, or this one body of work. I don't think that the stuff that we put on our websites, I can speak for myself, I will not be looking back at those photographs as my blue ribbon or the thing that gives me meaning. I will be looking at the experiences that those photographs represent.
And that is a powerful metaphor. At some stage, I or we will all run out of room, and it won't be the sharpest pictures I'll be looking at that fulfills me. I'll be looking at the experience those photographs represent. Hold that thought for my own thoughts about Africa in a moment, or a corner of Africa at least. I paraphrased slightly, but what David duChemin, my guest today, back for the full appearance after last week's cameo, what he says or said there plays into three things that have strong resonance with my life this week. A new beginning, which you'll hear about in the middle of the show today. And then something I've been thinking back to, which I will share in a moment. And the why of travel, which is a strong thread throughout today's show. Now, I don't feel I have to say this, but knowing the lives of a few of our very precious friends of the show, I really want to. When I talk about travel, especially the kind that takes you to faraway places and cultures that will feel completely unfamiliar, I know that's not something that everybody can do, whether that's for physical or emotional or financial reasons. And I do consider on shows like this, particularly because travel is a story oft told here, I do consider those feelings that, or perhaps barriers that people have when it comes to travel, understandable ones. And so, to those who listen who would love to travel but can't, to those who make their stories within, I was going to say closer confines, but I don't like the word confine in this context. To those who make their stories on canvases closer to their own backyards, I hope that when we do travel on this show, that the stories we tell are the special editions, which take a fair amount of time and work to make. I hope they help you live vicariously through our lenses and the lenses of others, such as our guests, in a way that isn't self-indulgent. That's very important to me. And so, yes, that includes the guests who tell these wondrous stories of being up close with gorillas in the wild, or have the privilege to be allowed access to people and cultures who choose to live, well, properly away from the noise of a diesel motor or a Barcelona football shirt. I'm always moved by the stories that our guests share, and that will certainly follow through on today's show. But to go back to what David said, at some stage, I or we will all run out of room, and it won't be the sharpest pictures we'll be looking at that fulfill us. It'll be the amazing life experiences those photographs represent. And so, with that in mind, I do want to share this. When I was listening back through the interview, in the what you might call the editing phase of the show, which is earlier this week, I came to that part and I was immediately taken back in time just by a couple of years to an experience that still to this day, I find almost impossible to I don't know, properly describe in terms of my emotion at the time. It's from the adventure we made, me, co-guide Jason and 4 photo walkers to the Gambia. And we've been invited to go to something called a Kankerang festival. So, just for context, because I know you may well be saying, a kanker what, Neil? A kanker what? Each January, and that's why we went at that time, each January, the Kankerang Festival in the Gambia comes absolutely alive with this incredible celebration of sound and movement. It's across most of the country. There's drums pounding in the streets, feet stamping, music that I still find rhythmically hypnotic. There's singing, there's shrieking, and in the midst of all this, there's usually a bark-covered Kankerang masquerade figure, usually red, not always, who sweeps across the crowd or through the crowd with an energy that feels impossible in the heat of Africa. But it's a fierce, joyful celebration of tradition. It really is. And I love that this cultural heritage is kept alive through all the generations, particularly the young, actually. So I found myself in an arena, actually, at a Kankerang festival. And I was right in the middle of the arena, in the middle of everything, because nobody had said, "Thou shalt not tread there," as so often happens at shows like this or festivals like this. And then, without really knowing what happened or how it happened, I was absolutely surrounded by people who were jumping and dancing and shrieking, whistling, turning around like mini tornadoes, whirling dervishes, although I know that's the wrong religion. But their hands sometimes they were clapping up in the air, often joined. And there was little old me, like a fish out of water in every single respect. Absolutely surrounded, completely immersed in what I'm calling the sound of Africa. Despite there being many hundreds, perhaps thousands of celebrations and festivals across this vast continent, that's my sound, if you like, of Africa. And honestly, I could not move. Not because anybody stopped me, not through any kind of fear. It was because of one thing. At that moment, at that time, I thought, and I really believe this, I was the luckiest person on earth to be listening to such a beautiful, chaotic beat of life. So much so that most of the photographs that I made were completely out of focus. They were terrible compositions, but they were certainly of an energy. And I couldn't see through the viewfinder either because, mainly because of tears, actually. And the fact that I was catching my breath with an utter delight. I remember wishing that my boys could be there at that moment. Not thousands of miles away in a classroom, but there with me at that moment experiencing life. This, I kept thinking, this is the food of life. And why am I crying so much was probably the other thought. And then as quickly as it arrived, the crowd sort of moved through or around me. And I suppose like a tornado, the trail of dust was all that was left as this sound, these people moved onward and the sound just sort of faded just a little. And that is what I felt again as I listened to David in the edit, talking about experience. A feeling I've had many times since returning from that trip. I suppose matched by a moment at a mosque when the call to break the fast went out in Delhi only a few months ago when we were in India together. Yes, I made some pictures, but by God or whatever you believe in, did I find myself understanding two words like I never have before: life experience.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I don't ever want to get to a point where Nothing delights me. Nothing surprises me. Wonder is very important to me. You think you've seen it all, and you turn the corner, and there is a monkey and a dog playing together, and it just tickled me. I don't want to go through life having experienced it only through the pages of National Geographic. I want to see it and touch it and smell it. And it turns out that in the 4 months leading up to this, there had already been 3 people killed. I was the 4th that fell and the only one that lived. My life was going to take one of two trajectories. I was either going to spend more and more time on the couch, not doing the things I loved, or I was going to have to do something that was fairly dramatic. The fact that elephants feel sound waves through their feet, the fact that mosquitoes taste with their feet, the fact that dolphins use echolocation, that there are so many means of understanding and experiencing the world.
That's David duChemin, my guest on the show today. Welcome to this week's Photo Walk as we make pictures, share stories, and open up the pages of our photographic sketchbooks. A show built from your letters, your thoughts, and the voices of inspiring guests from around the world. I'll dip into the mailbag shortly to get a feel for the thoughts that you have shared this week. But first, a heartfelt thank you to our Patreon members, or as I like to call you, the Extra Milers. Your support is the reason this podcast keeps on walking, week after week. Plus, my thanks to arthelper.ai who sponsor this show. If you've ever wanted to sell your photography online but haven't a Scooby where to start, this might just be your way in. You simply upload a photo and it magically creates professional posts and emails and even Substack drafts in your own voice. You'll also get mock-ups of your work framed so that your clients can see what it will look like on their wall, pricing help, and an art protection guarantee that says your images will not be used to train AI, and that's important. You can try it for free. Use the code PHOTOWALK at arthelper.ai to get 30 days of the pro version, and there is a link on today's show page as well. Right, on the show today, Anders Ekmark shares some ways in which he tackles the troll voice inside his head when low self-worth strikes. There's, I think, a poignant farewell letter to Salgado, written by my friend Tomasz from Fujilove. Kelvin Brown is finding courage to ask, can I make your portrait? And I, have a big announcement. Plus, there is this month's one-word assignment set by Dennis Linden. Hang on, Neil, back up a bit. A big announcement? Yes, I have, and it's coming up soon. So, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking shoes, check. Some spare film, an extra SD card as well, check. And passport. You may need to find that today, I hope. Let's walk. The letters, the emails, the comments that you leave gives our community a real uniqueness. And I'm always buoyed or enthused by how much of yourself you're willing to share and show. And this first letter today, this first one, I think it's a very important letter. It covers a multitude of things. And I think there's procrastination in this. I think there's rumination. I think there's certainly the subject of self-doubt. So we'll start with one from Anders Ekmark, a real food for thought letter when it comes to the quiet, or perhaps not so quiet battle, which many of us creatives face, the push, the pull between inspiration and expectation, and certainly the troll thoughts or the trolling thoughts that might try to stop us from enjoying stuff like creating, just getting started. Photography, art, writing, whatever that is, that doubting voice that sows that seed of doubt before we even start to make the first marks on a canvas or take a photograph. From a personal level, Anders, I've actually only just started to upload some story-style shorts and reels and things like that to Instagram and YouTube, which if you use that platform, and you've seen the two that I made so far, as I just walk along the path, that's the culmination, really, of years, Anders, don't tell anybody, just between you and I, of me telling myself that I only have a face for radio. So this letter actually comes at a pertinent time for me as well, and all those who want to Start something that they've been meaning to for a while. For those who sadly have that troll voice, building a figurative brick wall in front of your ideas and your intentions. Hello, Neil, says Anders. I'm writing this with a bit of help from translation software, so I hope the message still comes through clearly. It's a complicated subject, but I'm sending it with a hopeful spirit. I discovered your photo walk about 6 months ago, and it's been a joy. Glad to hear it. Many hours of wonderful listening. Careful, Anders. I might have to hide behind that sofa of flattery. The effect it's had on me is mixed. Though don't worry, not because of anything you've said or you're doing. I feel a butt coming on here. Listening has become a kind of escape, really, but also a quiet nudge to take more ownership of my own photography and how I feel about it, and also where I'm heading creatively. And your conversations with other photographers, well, they're like sparks. They light something in me often and remind me of why I love photography. But, you see, Anders, I knew there was a but coming. I raised the bar too high for myself, far too high most of the time. It's like I've built this steel door in my mind. It's heavy, fixed, unmovable. Though the strange thing is, actually, this door isn't actually locked. It just feels like it is. The key, as you sometimes say, is just getting started. But even that can be hard for somebody who doubts himself. What makes it hard are the thoughts that wait behind the door, what I call the troll thoughts. They can freeze you, they whisper doubts. But I've learned a few things that help quieten them from 2 Swedish authors, Anna Kaver, I hope I'm saying this correctly, and Assa Nilsson. One is this: picture yourself in a room filled with thoughts. The trolls are flying around trying to get your attention. Go across the room and open the windows. Notice them, sure, but don't hang on to them. Let them pass right through and out of those windows. Or this: imagine you're a theatre director. Those troll thoughts, well, put them on the stage. Now imagine the people that you trust are there as well. Put those on the same stage, people who offer their honest, helpful feedback, your friends, your family. You're in charge of who gets a microphone because you're the director, and who's lit by the spotlight, and whose voice fades into the background. You control the show. The artist Chuck Close once said, "Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work." It's a reminder that real progress doesn't come from waiting around for a lightning bolt of brilliance. It comes from turning up, doing the work, and letting the ideas find you along the way. The magic is in the doing. I suppose, Anders, though it always seems too simplistic, the old Nike phrase comes to mind here. Say it together. Just do it, Neil. Yes, just do it. That certainly plays into to this conversation. Chuck's quote really hit home, said Anders. I've struggled with low self-worth for a long time. I've been scared to put everything into my pictures, scared of what people might think. But every time I try, every time I show up anyway, it usually turns out in a win. I'm learning to take my place on the stage, whatever the outcome. And right now, it's not even about the image. It's about the fact that I'm showing up at all. And that feels very freeing. Thank you, Neil, for the energy you bring. You help me begin. Well, I'm very flattered if I do. Thank you, Anders, for that. And actually, I'm not sure I need to add something profound here, because I think you've done that in bucket loads. But I will say this, that it's easy to get stuck thinking about the work we want to make. But nothing really changes, and you're so right, until we stop circling the idea and just get on with it. Because the truth is, doing something that may not reach your high bar still gets you further than not doing anything at all. I know that seems obvious, and I know you know that. I'd be very happy to hear what my other listener has to say about this as well. It's a beautiful day today. Look at this. sunshine, and those Toy Story clouds that we sometimes talk about. Just a quick sketchbook picture along the path, 2000 shutter speed, 5.6, and 160 ISO. Yeah, I think it's a good shot as well, Barnes. I agree with you. A good sketchbook picture. Is that what you meant? No? Oh, I don't think you do. You mean these, don't you? There we go. Perfect. There's a bit of wind here. Oh, my letters and stuff flying everywhere for a moment. There's a bit of wind out here today. If you hear a whoosh, that's because it's a bit breezy. There's much talk today about travel. It is a theme, a thread which runs through the show, and it's a timely moment to make an announcement, I think, which comes in the middle of the show today. So you'll have to wait a little bit longer, but it is timely. Although it's not exactly a world's best kept secret, insofar that it was softly launched through one of the latest posts on the Photo Walk Instagram. But today, I want to tell you about a new venture, an adventure as much as a venture. It gets launched officially with a very good friend, and I'll do that in the middle-ish of the show. Prepare to take the journey beyond. More news to come. Right, the one-word challenge for this month is set by extra miler Dennis Linden. You have one more week to take part. And here is Dennis with just a few words, a reminder on what that one-word assignment is. Take it away, Dennis.
The Photo Walk assignment.
The word, Dennis, that we're working to this month. What is it?
Gear.
Why gear?
You know, I have gone, I guess, you know what? It goes back to that Fujifilm t-shirt where they show that evolution, you know, the Neanderthal and then the photographer carrying all the gear and eventually, you know, holding an X100V or whatever it was.
That's it, yeah.
But I think a lot of us have been through this process, especially those who are probably on the photo walk, of expansion of gear and contraction of gear. And where I am now with my physical problems, I need a small, light, but competent camera to record the documents that I want to create. And I think others are in the same place. And I take photographs, coincidentally, of my gear in specific settings or gear that I have evolved or chosen for a specific task. And so I think taking a picture of some of your gear or the minimum amount of gear that you can get away with in a setting would be what I would like to see. I'd like to see what other people use in anger on a regular basis. You know, you have to get the right bit of gear for the right project.
And best of luck. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show. If you can, resize them to 2,500 pixels. You are an absolute star. Otherwise, don't worry, send them full res. I'll do the heavy lifting and send some thoughts about the image as well if it helps to tell the story. No watermarks, no borders, please. But do include links to your social feed, your website, etc., etc. Full URLs are really handy, please. So, to the first part of my conversation with my adventuring guest this week, the Canadian photographer David duChemin. You heard, if you will, a cameo last week. I think it was a bit more than a cameo. But this is our actual interview, if you like, actual full-length conversation. And if I can use the word journey again, I'll use it a couple of times today, I'm sure, more than a few. That's what I think this conversation is, you know. I think there are some real twists and turns in this chat, including where we talk about probably one of the hardest decisions a human might ever have to make when it comes to your own physicality. But what I really, really hope comes across today is David's desire to truly see, hear, smell, taste and touch the world. The enthusiasm he has for the animals that move across this earth is absolutely palpable. And he'll certainly be coming back to talk more. And on camera, actually. But that's another story for another day. I do know this, that when he runs out of room, as he eloquently put it at the start of the show, he'll have many, many, many stories replaying those five senses. I feel utterly privileged to have spent time getting to know David, and after this, I hope you will feel the same way too. Here's part one of two parts today.
I had a question, David, to start with. It was really about unpicking who or how you came to photography, but I feel like I really want to start with comedy, because it's something you mentioned to me, and it's something I hadn't originally thought of putting into our conversation. And I'm quite intrigued by it. Years and years and years ago, as an exercise when I was working in broadcasting, we were all sent off to a comedy club and told to write an act. And I went away and I found it and probably still to this day, the most nerve-wracking thing I've done in my life. How on earth did you do it for so long?
There are two questions there. One is, how on earth did you get into that? The other is, how did you sustain it? Sustaining it is the easy part. I snuck in, as I do so much in life, sort of accidentally and through the back door. I began in college. I learned how to juggle. That led to me learning a couple of magic tricks, learning some physical comedy skills, and entertaining kids. And I spent a couple of years entertaining children and found very quickly that the best shows, the ones that really went well, were intergenerational. There were kids there were parents, there were grandparents, and I could engage different levels of humor. The kids will always find fart jokes amusing, but the adults will find a different level of humor in there. And I really enjoyed that. And one thing led to another, and I got more and more bookings. And I realized on graduation that I could and I was in theology school. So graduation meant I either went into the so-called ministry or I did something else. And I was working full time to put myself through college as a physical comedian, magic, juggling, stand-up, a whole mix of things. And I decided this was going so well, I wanted to see where it led. And so I did. And 12 years later, I realized I had got to the end of what I wanted to do and was a little exhausted from all the traveling and wanted to try something different. But it was exhilarating. You're not wrong about how hard it is when you die a comedy death on stage. And I towards the end of my career, the last 5 or 6 years, I was doing seated auditoriums of 1,500 to 2,500 people, which when you get them laughing is such a high. It's an exhilarating feeling. You feel like a conductor. You know, with your timing and the right words, when they're going to laugh and when they're not. So when it's going well, it is just the greatest feeling on earth. And when it is going poorly, very few things rival how alone and terrifying you can feel in a crowd of people. It really was a wonderful, wonderful roller coaster ride.
So the Mission's loss and Comedy Central's loss is now photography's gain. How did the photography start? From where did that come?
Photography's been with me since I was a kid. My father was a Canadian soldier. He was a tank commander, but also did some photography for the Army. So I've been around cameras, although only as much as my father was around, which was not much. But at some point, I picked up a rangefinder camera at a neighbor's garage sale and thought, this was just going into high school. I thought, I've got to have a thing. Everyone's got a thing. And music was clearly not my thing. And other forms of art were really not my thing. I didn't have a thing. And I picked up this camera and it just made sense. The technical stuff I always sort of wrestle through. I figured it out. But the discipline of looking at the world through a frame and composing and finding a moment. And I would go out, we didn't have a lot of money. I bought this rangefinder for peanuts. And I would go out some days when I couldn't afford film with my camera in hand and just, make photographs with no film, because there was something about the way that putting the camera in front of my face made me awake or alive to the scene in front of me, the woods, the forest, sitting on the edge of a pond photographing ducks and just feeling so present. And with a longer lens, feeling so much closer to and engaged with the scene. So photography has always been in my background ever since I was 14, and arguably a little bit longer than that. It was when I got so burned out on the travel of doing my comedy show that I sort of started looking around. And weirdly, digital had come and I had embraced the digital revolution. I was relearning my craft. And an organization that saw me performing said, would you consider coming? Because mostly I worked with children and families. And they said, would you consider coming and seeing our work in Haiti? Because we think there might be a partnership here, a way that you can bring awareness and raise funds for us. And I said, well, I'm keen to look and to hear you out. And just before I went, I guess they finally did their due diligence and, Googled me and made sure I wasn't a creep. They found my photography portfolio and they said, would you bring your cameras and shoot for us? Yeah. And so they extended the trip, made it a little longer. I, of course, was thrilled. And I was probably there for about, 12 hours and made a couple of photographs, and some light bulb went on, 100-watt light bulb. I went, this is it. And I went home, had a wonderful week, shot some, in hindsight, some very mediocre photographs, but the excitement, the idea was there. And I went home and I told everyone, I said, I'm leaving comedy and I'm going to become a humanitarian photographer. And they said, well, what's that? And I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to find out. And they said, well, can you make a living at this? I said, well, again, I'm not sure, but we're going to find out. And I sort of feel quite strongly, if you can sell juggling to the world, you can sell anything. And so I left the stage that year and began humanitarian photography. And it was interesting because I had sort of felt like I was tired of being on the stage. I felt like I was tired of being sort of in front of the camera, and that being behind the camera would give me a break from that. And the great irony is I'm on a much bigger stage now than I ever was. But I think that time in comedy gave me the skills to kind of navigate that.
Yeah, and there'll be skills, no doubt, you're using now. And once a performer, that never really leaves you, does it? And it must obviously help you with your education. And
it very much does in terms of presenting and that sort of thing. And it does light me up on the inside to be in front of an audience of people again. But I think that I've been asked this so many times over the years, and so only it's just now that I'm realizing that based on what you said about going to a comedy club and how hard it was, set aside the performance aspect, one of the great keys to comedy, to good comedy, is observation. If you are not observant, you will have nothing to say. And I think that is probably at its deepest. If we really dig deep, that's where comedy, my time in comedy, and what made me have any measure of success in comedy is the thing I think that translates to photography very well, because that's also the key to photography. It's not how you use your camera. It's begins much further, much deeper in the brain, and that's how you observe the world. If you can be observant and truly present and have an opinion on things visually, I think that lays a groundwork for becoming a photographer.
I'm trying to remember the comedian I was listening to recently who said he was talking about observational skills and talked about the fact that nothing surprises him anymore. You've traveled to 58 countries. Surely nothing surprises you anymore. I mean, now you've taken the spoken word onto a more pictorial level. Does anything surprise? I mean, you've got a fairly well stamped passport, David, I would say.
I do. Fairly well stamped many passports. And things still surprise me. I don't ever want to get to a point where nothing delights me, nothing surprises me. Wonder is very important to me. But certainly nothing surprises me about human nature. I feel like I've kind of seen I've observed enough of the gamut of human nature and experience that on some level I don't go, wow, I didn't expect that. But you know what? The surprises are in the little things. The surprises are and again, going back to comedy, in the juxtapositions, the combinations of things that you just never expected. And I can't think of an example offhand, but there are things that, I can't think of an example. I was in Varanasi in India a few years ago, right before the pandemic. And I turned the corner and there was this incredible scene of a monkey and a dog playing together. And somewhere and my camera wasn't doing very well that day for some reason. And the pictures I have are not particularly technically skillful. But this moment of this dog and this monkey, and the monkey was pulling the tail of the dog, and it was just, like you think you've seen it all, and you turn the corner and there is a monkey and a dog playing together, and it just tickled me. I was laughing so hard. That may be one reason that the photos aren't that compelling. It was just too good a moment to give it to the camera. So there is still wonder out there.
I wonder whether that can be a title of another book. The monkey playing with the dog and the surprises that you have in life. It just seems too delicious not to have that. What does travel... I'm intrigued about the humanitarian work and how that then played into NGO. Perhaps that's a separate question, but I'm intrigued as to what travel does for you and what it's done for your photography. I know it seems a bit of an obvious question because it does open your eyes to a world that you would otherwise not have seen.
There are people that photograph at home and never take their camera more than 30, 40 kilometers from the house and can photograph a rich life lived locally. I am not one of those people. There is something about the otherness of cultures and species that I wouldn't encounter otherwise. For me, it's all about the encounter, and I find wonder in the differences, and maybe on some level observing those differences and finding that in them we have a commonality. I can sit for hours with bears, and I will fully admit to anthropomorphizing these animals and seeing in them the kind of emotions that I feel. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it leads to empathy and a concern for the wild and for wilderness. I know that they don't feel the same things as us, but they certainly feel. And it's the same with other cultures. To be in a place that I don't fully understand, that I can't take for granted because I don't know the forms, I don't know the customs, I don't know the language. Maybe I'm just a really curious person, and it's the things with which I am familiar at home that they don't excite me the way exploring a new culture or a place that I've been many times and I'm digging deep on, that I just find so fascinating because of the differences. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that gets close to the heart of what travel does for me. I think it keeps me humble. It keeps me... You can't travel and not pay attention. If you do, just stay at home. For me, it's just it just ignites the wonder and the fascination.
I've always thought for me anyway, there's an element of being out of your comfort zone, being in somebody else's domain. Whether that's Varanasi, which we're going to visit next year, actually, funnily enough, with the podcast. Brilliant. I'm thoroughly looking forward to that, and I'm going to go look for that dog and the monkey, see if I can get a picture and bring it back to you.
I can drop a pin on a Google map for you.
If you can have a chat with them, that would be great. but it's that feeling of being... I was going to use the phrase out of your depth, and it's a very good phrase to use because your work fathoms certainly underlines the nature of going somewhere that you might not feel instantly comfortable with. Going under the water and being with creatures, I always think a creature that looks that big, and I'm just holding out my hands, becomes that large, doesn't it? When you're underwater, suddenly everything's magnified by 3, 4, 5 times. How does that feel, making that kind of work?
Well, you nailed it. Out of my depth. It's just, not to put too fine a point on it or get, very punny, but, I've never felt like such a fish out of water than being.
Give you that one.
Thank you. I very self-consciously use that one. I can hear the groans from here. It was hard, and it's still hard to be, because of course scuba requires a level of attentiveness just to stay alive. Am I going too deep? Am I rising too quickly? What am I about to step on? Or what is, what's there that can stab me, bite me, otherwise damage me? Or what precious, fragile thing am I about to, smash with my fins because I'm not paying attention? There's such a level of attentiveness required that it's very hard to bring the camera into that process. And at the beginning, everything is difficult. I thought, how hard can it be? I've been using a camera for 30 years. I'm comfortable in the water. I did my training. You don't bring a camera in while you're training, but you do your training. You get all your certifications. And then you think, okay, now it's time. It was the hardest thing I have ever done with a camera. Everything is different. Light is different. Color is different. It's one of the reasons I almost entirely present my underwater work in black and white, is because very quickly I realized I don't like using strobes, and you need strobes if you want to bring the full spectrum of light back in and have color photographs that don't look just all green or all blue. But black and white worked very well for what I wanted to accomplish. But it was hands down the hardest thing I have ever learned to do. But also very, very rewarding, incredibly rewarding. One of the things about the underwater world is that the animals on some level are less fearful than terrestrial animals. You will get much closer to a shark, for example, or potentially to a whale or a sea lion, that they're driven by curiosity. They will come and check you out in a way that many animals, terrestrial animals, will not. It was probably the very hardest thing I've ever had to do, but like I said, one of the most rewarding, and into a world where, to your earlier point, so far out of my comfort zone, so far. There was nothing that you don't even have a place to stand most of the time. You're floating in 360 degrees or however many degrees a sphere has. It's wonderful. Truly wonderful.
I love the documentary feel to that set. Scale is something I talk about quite often when it comes to photography, and I like the documentary feel a lot. And there's one particular picture, and you mentioned a whale actually, is the whale picture where you can just see your hand just appearing into the water, just into the edge of the frame. And I think those sort of features, those sort of details, can be incredibly important for storytelling. They show the human in the picture.
That was actually the hand of my guide, who was saying, "That's far enough, David." Put it, and I clipped it. But when I reviewed the photos and saw that frame in the edit, for some reason I thought, no, that has to stay.
Yeah,
I think that one of the things that if you look at all of my work, I hope one of the things that you will see is what I want very much for people to feel is the feeling of being there. I want them to, again, no pun intended, I want them to feel immersed in the scene, whether it's terrestrial with a bear or a lion, or I want the image to have depth. I want it to have scale. I want it to feel like you're there. I very much do not want it to feel like, a tourist with a long lens who is merely a fly on the wall. I want to feel, and I want those experiencing my photographs to feel that immersion and that depth. And sometimes it's that, that hand in the frame, or that added element that makes you feel present in the scene as opposed to merely looking at the scene, maybe that's why I travel, Neil, because I don't want just to observe life. I don't want to go through life having experienced it only through the pages of National Geographic. I want to see it and touch it and smell it and feel it. And however I can bring that into my photographs, I want to do for those that will live vicariously through them or experience while they're having their own adventures.
You're talking of scale and continuing the conversation about scale. I'm lucky enough to see that wonderful picture of the bear behind you, which is on your screen. There's a great proximity to that picture. They're equally from the Savannah pictures. There's a photograph taken at a very low angle where you're looking up at this just magnificent, majestic rhinoceros. I'm wondering if you are on a longer lens, but it looks to me like you're not really that far away from these animals. The proximity's pretty close.
It's very, very close. And I should say that not every photograph that looks proximate is. You can put your camera in places you could never put yourself. So this bear photograph you're referencing would have been shot probably on 24 millimeter, if not wider, and right at the foot of the bear. But it was operated, I was about 15 feet away using a radio trigger.
Okay.
The camera was set up on a beach. The bears come to feed on the salmon, to look at the water's edge for fish. And there was a very good chance that, every hour, one or two bears, if not more, would pass that way. And so I just sat there and waited, and the bear walked past, and I said, "Hey, bear," and he or she looked at me, and very briefly, which is what she's doing in the photograph, and then just carried on, paid no mind to the camera rig sitting at her feet. The rhinoceros was the same, although there are occasions with white rhinos where I have just laid on the ground and rhinos are curious. Black rhinoceros are a different thing. You don't want to tangle with them, but white rhinos are timid and curious, and they'll come and check you out and then kind of back up. But if I could photograph from one position with one lens for the rest of my life, with no risk to my safety, with no risk of changing the animal's behavior or jeopardizing them with habituation, I would be on the ground with 16 to 24 millimeters somewhere in there, because it's the encounter, Neil. It's even when you're a little further away and you're looking at it on your iPad, pressing the shutter button remotely, and there is this feeling of encounter. I was in what in the rainy season would have been a mud hole that rhinos would sort of wallow in, and it was dried out and it was a bit of a divot in the earth. And last February, I found myself with a friend lying in one of these, and the rhino came so close. I mean, just this beautiful, curious, incredibly long horn. I could have easily reached out and touched it on the snout. It was that close. And the resulting pictures were garbage. The light was harsh, and it's just, but the encounter was just pure wonder to be that close to something so magnificent, so other, so large, so bigger than me. The fact that the camera gets me there is so important, but that it resulted in no meaningful photograph, that's fine. There will be other moments.
Do you know, David, you would be the most annoying dinner guest, because I'd never want to be sat next to you, because I'd be thinking, well, what's the point of sitting here? Nobody's going to talk to me tonight. David's got these incredible stories. But it's not only about the animals, it's about people as well. Pilgrim is a perfect example, isn't it? The work that you do when you travel and you work with people. It seems to me you find humanity as interesting, and humans as interesting on every single level as a bear or a rhino or a shark or a whale.
Yeah, there's a reason I'm limiting myself right now to critters rather than humans, and I think it has to do with COVID. Someone asked me recently why I'm not doing humanitarian work anymore, and I said there's a prerequisite that you have to like humans. I'm on a bit of a break with humanity right now, and I think it's I keep saying I don't like people, but I like my people. I like people individually, and I think that's what shines through any work that I've done with humanity. Is I find in individual people endless stories. We are so different and yet also the same, and so but I'm taking a little bit of a break from that. And I think COVID was responsible, in that I, like everyone else on the planet, kind of developed a bit of social anxiety. And the idea of going back to some of these places where I do have to be quite immersed. I could never do the work I do without being right there. Yeah. I have no interest in the sneaky hip shot at 200 millimeters. I want to sit next to the sadhu, the pilgrim, the nomad. And even though we don't share much language, I still think there's a way of connecting and of communicating through body language that, especially as a photographer, where I had a friend say to me, he was my translator, and we worked in northern Kenya together for my nomads work. And he said to me one day, someone had just given me another camel, and I've been given goats and camels, and my friend Kura looked at me and said, David, I live in Kenya. I have been doing this for years, and no one has ever given me a goat or a camel. What's going on? I said, I have no idea. Culturally, you would be the one to speak to that. But I know when you are really looking at someone, not just, looking at them, but seeing them, and giving them your full attention. I'm half deaf. I'm deaf in my right ear. And so when people talk to me, I have to sort of lean in and give them the mistaken impression sometimes that I'm really, really interested in them. But people want to be heard. They want to be seen and paid attention to. And I think too often photographers go in with their cameras. We do the sneaky hip shot. We take one picture, we look at the back of the screen, and we move on. If there is engagement, if there's connection, it happens afterwards. And I think we've got it backwards. I think the connection has to happen first. The engagement has to happen first. The interest has to happen. And from there, then photographs that are from much closer, that are intimate, that feel like the person is right there. You can see the texture on their skin and their ornamentation. Anyway, I'm a long way from the beginning of this question, but I am still interested. I'm taking a break right now, and finding that interest is that itch is scratched by being with bears and lions and that sort of thing.
And David returns to the show soon. Actually, sooner than that, because he is part of the announcement in a roundabout fashion. But yes, officially part 2 is back soon. But David's back soon before the soon, if that makes any sense. Now, before I go any further, I want to take a moment to recognise a photographer whose work has shaped how many of us, I think, see the world. He is a man I mention often. Sadly, somebody I never received the privilege, the opportunity to speak with. His recent exhibitions have been deeply immersive, and I hope that the work of his foundation will continue to show that work in a way that I was privileged to see it. Sebastião Salgado isn't just known for his extraordinary images, but for the absolute depth of care and humanity behind them. Humanity is a word I've used over and over when talking about his incredible work. And if you had the good fortune to visit any of his shows, I'm thinking of Amazonia in the past couple of years. Perhaps it was longer than that, actually. These years go past so quickly. You'll know exactly what I mean by an immersive experience. He's walked... Goodness, this wind is really getting up. You can hear it. He's walked into some of the most challenging places on Earth. Not to sensationalize, but to connect. And I think it's in that respect that his pictures that he's made, his photo stories that he's told, have carried so much and will continue to carry so much weight. Now, I was going to write a long tribute myself, but then something arrived in my inbox from a man called Tomasz. It was actually from his Photo Snack mail out, which is on Substack, which is worth following. And I think he really encompassed what I and so many others feel. And I know exactly why I felt something reading it, because it was written as a letter. And if you don't mind, what I'd like to do to honour the words that you wrote, Tomasz, and the great man himself, is I'd just like to read those words from the choir to the studio.
Dear Sebastião, I never met you, but for years I've felt as though I knew you through your photographs, through the people you introduced to me, through the quiet way you showed us how to see. You've left this world, and I wanted to write you a note. Not because you'll read it, but because there's gratitude that needs to be spoken somehow. Thank you for the way you looked at people, not from above, not from afar, but from beside them. You stayed, you listened, you bore witness, and your photographs, they still carry that presence with dignity. You showed us miners, refugees, mothers, children, people whose names we'll never know, but whose eyes we can't forget. You gave them space, and in doing so, you gave us something too. You reminded us that photography can still be about truth and about care. Later, when you turned your lens to nature, I saw something shift. The same reverence, but this time directed at the earth itself. And when you returned home to Brazil to rebuild a dying forest with your wife Lélia, planting millions of trees, one by one, I understood. You weren't just documenting the world. You were there, you were loving it, actively, bravely, quietly. Your images have been with me for years. They've shaped how I see, how I work, how I move through this life. And today I just wanted to say thank you for what you made, for how you lived, for reminding me and all of us that the camera in the right hands can be an act of hope. Rest well, Sebastião.
Just incredible words, Tomasz. A really well written letter, and thank you very much for sharing that with the world so that we could share it in our tiny corner of that world as well. Now, I've been saying over the last month or so that in 2026 we have 2 new life travel plans for you and your camera or cameras. And By we, I don't mean my friendly furball barking machine Barney, though I dare say some of our journeys he would absolutely adore. But perhaps not the markets of Delhi. He loved the smells, that's for sure. But I'm not sure he'd love the heat so much. He's definitely a find a pond and have a dip dog. No, the we I am referring to is my good friend Lynn Fraser, who's accompanied me on every single one of our retreats and adventures, at first as a guest, later on as a co-host in terms of the bunkhouse in Scotland being Lynn's own, I'm going to call it family retreat in many ways, and now as a partner in a new venture that we've set up to embrace our own joint love of travel and the journey. It is a venture called The Journey Beyond, and it has its own website, which you can go to today, thejourneybeyond.uk, The Journey Beyond, all one word, .uk, and it's officially launched. Yes, this kind of travel is for those who find wonder not just in distant landscapes, but in the smallest human moments. It's for photographers, it's for writers, it's for those who journal, it's for podcasters, it's for those who like to sketch, those who watch, those who listen. It's for people who'd rather spend time with a local blacksmith in Viskery than queue for a tower, who want to understand why the fishermen of Banjul paint their boats in such vivid colours, or what it feels like to greet the day in silence beside the Ganges. You know about our trip to India, planned for next year. That will be on the website. But today, I'd like to officially launch the second trip we are making. Very different to India. A completely different experience. Yes, definitely less markets, less tuk-tuks, less chaos. But that's why the two complement each other in a strange way and excite us both so much. We are going with you, hopefully, to Mongolia. Yes, that place where many of us mentioned it in our youth, didn't we? Or knew of it as the place that is further away seemingly than the moon. Mum, I'm not cleaning my room. In fact, I'm off to Outer Mongolia. I'll be back Saturday. I'll have links on the show page today, of course, and you'll find it on thejourneybeyond.uk. But for the moment, I thought I'd find three friends to share their thoughts about this magnificent country. The first voice you will hear of three in this mini feature, in the middle of the show, to launch our trip and our new venture, has got to be Lynn Fraser, who shares her love for the place and, the mystique as well of this just incredible country. The second is from Ollie, who's been organising with, companies like ours, trips to this extraordinary different place that most people would never in 100 years consider going to until they hear about it. And he loved it so much, actually, he married into a Mongolian family. And then, the third voice is... it's a small extra, it's a cameo. It's a small extra piece from David duChemin, who you will clearly hear holds this place dear in his heart too. So, welcome to Mongolia, and welcome to the Journey Beyond. Well, we're 2.2 miles exactly from Gatwick Airport. And when I say we, it's myself and Lynn Fraser. Well-travelled, I was going to say, but that sounds very rude.
It does a bit, doesn't it?
Well-travelled Lynn Fraser. Award-winning Lynn Fraser.
A bit ragged round the edges, Lynn Fraser.
I wonder how long I can keep using the award-winning one.
I think it's maybe losing its shine a little bit.
No, 3 or 4 years, I'm still going to be doing it. Wherever we go, hello, I'm Neil. Here's award-winning Lynn Fraser.
I'll just have to get some shiny clothes and a big star to put above my head.
Well, the reason why it's pertinent that we're close to Gatwick is that's just one of the hubs in the UK you could fly out of to go to a destination called Mongolia. And I know that I've mentioned this on the show so far. Alongside India, there's the two big travel journeys next year with the podcast. India, Varanasi and Kolkata, and Mongolia. Now, you're my Mongolian expert when it comes to photography and travel there, because you've been and you loved it.
I absolutely loved it. I went in 2015.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, the trip that is pretty much still at the top of my list of experiences, life-changing experiences.
You really mean life-changing?
Yes, I think that's when it really opened my eyes to how other people in the world live. Because we lived alongside the Mongolian Kazakhs, the eagle hunters. So to spend time with them each day, take part in their daily activities, see how they lived and how different it was from the way that I lived. I would say it was life-changing.
You live alongside them. Are you able to actually join in with the activities that they're doing?
Oh, yes. At one of the camps, in fact, Shokhan's camp, pretty much as soon as we arrived, some of his daughters came and grabbed myself and one of the other ladies and pulled us off to go and help catch the goats and the sheep. And they were sorting them out, and some of the sheep got thrown over the fence because they weren't going in the corral for the night. And it was great fun.
Did you manage to catch any?
I didn't throw any over the fence, but I did manage to catch one or two, yes.
So this is where I say formally now, we are announcing Mongolia and that I'm working with Lynn on a travel project. Well, I say more than a project, it's a company. You can say the company name, though.
The Journey Beyond.
It is. And it's beyond everything, isn't it? It's beyond photography. It is photography, but it can be beyond photography.
Yes, we're hoping to encompass as many of the creative arts as you want to bring with you. Writing, sound, painting, drawing. Just come and sit and enjoy the scenery and the people around you.
We used to, at school, it was always the place that sounded the furthest away. It was, I'm going to Mongolia. I'm going to be in outer Mongolia. Because it does sound like a world apart.
It does, doesn't it? It sounds very romantic, very exotic. And I do remember when I went out to Mongolia thinking, because I was in Western Mongolia, that I was actually in outer Mongolia. And it was otherworldly, because it was such a big trip to get there.
Because you land, where do you land? And then you travel 3 hours across from the east to the west, don't you?
Yeah, so you land in Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital of Mongolia. And then to get out to Western Mongolia, you then take an internal flight to Ulgi. And at the time that I travelled, that flight was 3 hours. I think it's now maybe slightly shorter than that.
And the people are fantastic, aren't they? They're the friendliest people I thought the friendliest people resided in parts of India, but I'm told that it gets even friendlier.
Yes, the Kazakhs were the warmest, most welcoming people that I've had the pleasure to spend time with. And I have spent time with people in different parts of the world now, but everywhere we went, we were welcomed into their homes. Sometimes you had to wait outside for 5 minutes or so, but that was because they were running around inside, setting everything up for us. And we'd walk in, there'd be this lovely spread of food on the floor on a beautiful coloured tablecloth, and they'd put out a range of their cheeses that they've made and butter that they've made, bread, biscuits, sweets, and the milky tea that they make.
It's not just the milky tea, though, is it? Actually, I was under some sort of impression that you would be eating your Mongolian version of cornflakes with vodka.
Yes, they do like their vodka. Yes, and they like toasting visitors. So they would go and get their bottle of vodka, bring it out, and do toasts to welcome us to their home. And then somebody else would come in and make a toast. And this would go on until they'd finished the bottle of vodka. So you imagine you're having a little shot of vodka with each of the toasts. And then we would take a bottle of vodka with us as a gift. And we'd think, oh, thank goodness, the bottle of vodka's finished. And then out would come the new one, and then we'd start all over again.
One of the loveliest things, I think, is to have time. And by that I mean to do something that is, well, as we've said, otherworldly, but also have the opportunity to soak it in, to be by yourself a bit, and the scenery behind. Now, how do I pronounce this? We're saying Gers.
Yeah.
Ollie said Gears.
Gears, yeah.
But the scenery beyond into the mountains, just phenomenal.
Absolutely stunning. If you think of maybe the likes of Scotland, Switzerland, and then multiply that by 100.
Wow.
It's just vast. The steps just go on and on and on and on. And you see little scatters of gears, but they're just tiny little pinpricks of white.
People talk about layers. This is layers, isn't it?
Oh, layers and layers and layers, yes.
Yeah. When you came back, let's walk this way. We're getting Lynn onto a flight. We've had a planning couple of days all about Mongolia, but we need to get you back to the airport now. But what was your last... Oh, this is probably going to be tricky to answer But what was your last? The words that when you departed Mongolia, those words where you thought, oh, I have done this, or I have experienced this, or I have felt that. What would those have been?
It was such an experience, and to be welcomed. I think the welcome that we had, that feeling of warmth, comradeship, that we were all part of one humanity, that we could spend time with these people taking part in their lives. It was just an incredible experience. Not something that I'd ever experienced like that before.
Yeah. What's it like to be up close to one of those majestic, fantastic eagles?
Oh, they're beautiful birds, and they get caught when they're quite young. They're called a balapan. They go out and catch the balapan, and they spend time with the family, and the bond between the eagle and its handler is palpable.
Is it?
Yeah, they're very well looked after, and they are released back into the wild after about 8 years.
Oh, they go back out, but they can manage that as well?
Yes.
Well, I suppose they've been taught to hunt, so they know how to hunt.
Yeah.
But I wonder how you break the connection between the handler, the family, and the bird that might be thinking, oh, I don't know, I'd find that really hard. It's like letting Barney say, Barney, 8 years are gone now, my son, off you go.
They have a lot of respect for their animals.
Yes.
And I think it's quite important to them. That's a question we can ask when we're out there.
Ollie, we're in Oxfordshire, which is, you don't have I thought you might have a sign that said so many thousand miles pointing that direction towards Mongolia, but you don't.
No, we don't. Probably should do.
Yeah.
We're about, 12,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You've split your time really between beautiful Oxfordshire and beautiful Mongolia. It's a country you fell in love with. Well, you not just fell in love with the country. That's your dog. Yeah. It's not your turn.
Piece of editing.
My dog does the same thing, so the audience will be used to this.
Yeah.
But you also fell in love with your Mongolian wife.
Yes, almost 20 years ago I travelled to Mongolia under the auspices of doing some work experience for a travel company before returning to my advertising life in London, but I never went back. So.
Yeah, scripts don't always work out, do they?
Exactly.
No. Tell me about Mongolia, because this will be a feature where we're talking a lot about the history, the cultural significance of what we're doing, and so on and so forth. What is it about Mongolia for you? Because you are now very tied to it as a country, because it's your business as well. It's your travel business.
Well, I think the most alluring part of Mongolia is people, extremely welcoming, but of course the wide open spaces, the sort of lack of sort of modern facilities everywhere. I love riding horses and hiking.
Oh, you're a rider?
Things like that. So one of my first trips in Mongolia was going on a riding trip for 2 weeks, having not really ridden before, but it was wonderful up with the herders in the northern part of Mongolia. So yeah, riding, people, wide open spaces, what's not to love? Yeah.
This will be the first of many, many mentions, but my mother-in-law needed this explaining when I said the eagle hunters, and I got all very animated about it, and she sat back in her chair, sort of the look of horror that we were going out there hunting eagles. It's not that at all.
No, it's not. It's actually a bit of a misnomer, because I also thought the same.
Oh, right. Okay.
How are they hunting these sort of birds of prey that should be protected? No, so they're a community of probably only about 80 hunters, but the reason why they're called hunters is they hunt with the eagles to hunt small game or prey such as marmots, ground squirrels called zodoms in Mongolian, sometimes small foxes, baby wolves, the eagles can go after. Yeah, so there's about 80 families who do it. It's not just restricted to men. It used to be the sort of eldest sons of eagle hunters that would follow in the family footsteps. But and there's lots of young girls who do it these days. Most famously, Ashulpan, the eagle huntress, who was the subject of the film, The Eagle Huntress, which you may have seen. But now there are quite a lot of young girls who take it up, so it's recaptured the imagination of the modern world out there. So there are quite a lot of up and coming hunters,
and we're lucky to see it as a sport, as it were, as a I suppose you could compare it, if you live in the UK, to a county show.
Yes, yeah, county show, gymkhana, that sort of thing.
This is somewhat different to that, but
yeah. So every autumn in September they come together from all over the region to sort of show off their skills. They train their birds for months and years before they put them into competition. But yeah, they'll have eagle hunting competitions, so setting them off from the top of a hill to go down and land on the correct owner's arm.
Yeah.
You know,
Collecting coins, I think, was another one.
Yeah, so they do a lot of things on horseback as well. So picking up coins from the floor on horseback while still on their horses.
Yeah.
So that's quite dangerous, but very exciting for the onlooker. And there is also a goatskin tug of war on horseback, which again is
goatskin tug of war.
So that's quite a.
They don't even do that at the Highland Games.
No, I know.
Okay. It really does exist.
It does exist,
Right.
and you shall see it.
The exotic nature of being so far from anything is what truly is the allure for me. In my childhood, I'm pretty sure, and I was talking with Lynn about this, that if you said, look, I'm on my way to Outer Mongolia, it was a way that we used to say there's nothing further than that. If the world was flat, that's where it would end. It's that nature of this that I think is really exciting for people, isn't it? For those travellers that you work with your company.
Yeah, I mean, as often people come to us and it's, they call it the last frontier, or they say it's one of the last things on their bucket list, but they've been thinking about it ever since they heard of Genghis Khan, or Chinggis as he's known in Mongolia, since sort of childhood. It's got that sort of mythical quality. But also it's still the least populated country on earth. That has some sort of pull for a lot of people.
Okay.
So there's less people per square kilometre in Mongolia than anywhere else on earth. And over half of the population live in the capital, Ulaanbaatar. So therefore, I mean, that's an average of the most sparsely populated country. But in reality, it really is, because half of the country of 2-3 million, half of those live in the capital. Yeah. So there's only 1.5 million people who live in the countryside, in a country that's about 2.5 times the size of France. So
it's incredible. I'm going to ask you one more question, and it might be a bit of I don't know how easy this is to answer, because you experience so many people that go and visit Mongolia for the first or maybe return times. What are people, what's a word or a phrase or a feeling that you most hear when people have finished their trip, they've finished their tour, and they're about to head home?
Well, there are plenty of words. I mean, inspiring usually comes through. Rejuvenation. A lot of people find it very sort of cathartic trip, place to go. Life affirming, another one. There's lots of interaction with locals. It's a very welcoming country. I think in the Western world, we've sort of let go of that sort of sense of community.
David, with all the places where you have your passport stamped, one of those that I spied is Mongolia. And we're planning our trip to Mongolia. And I can't let it pass by, this opportunity to ask somebody who's travelled to so many places and has a fair deal of experience in different cultures, asking you what you thought of Mongolia.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm incredibly jealous, and I attempted just to come on the trip myself. I loved Mongolia. There are a few places, and it's been a little while, but there are a few places on the planet that I have loved as much. I'm very attracted to wildness, and Mongolia was one of those places. There's something about the culture that is so distinct. We discussed this in our conversation about the things that I'm drawn to. I don't photograph at home that much, and I'm drawn to things that are different. And Mongolia is incredibly different. The first time I was there, I had an ongoing client that would take me around the world to various countries to photograph in different humanitarian contexts. And one year, this particular the winter contract was coming up, and she said, "How would you feel if we send you, to Thailand or South India?" And I thought, well, it's going to be rainy and cold in Canada. I thought that sounds great. And they came back to me another week later and said, "So we've shifted. How do you feel about like Sri Lanka?" And I said, "Oh, that sounds fantastic. That sounds wonderful." And they called a week later and says, "Well, good news. We've got it all figured out. You're going to Mongolia." I said, "But this is in like February, right?" So my first experience in Mongolia was middle of winter, cold, and I had the time of my life. I was there for 2 weeks, mostly the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, but I had an incredible time. The people were exceptional. And on the strength of that, a few years later, planned a trip, much as you're doing, and we explored the steppes and went through the Gobi Desert, and we had an extraordinary time. We had 3 or 4 drivers in these old Russian minivans.
Oh, yeah,
and,
fantastic.
We just had such a time. We made a mistake on one of the last, not the last night, but maybe the sort of either the penultimate night or the third to last, and we bought our drivers some bottles of very good vodka.
Which I understand is currency there, really, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And they were so thrilled, and they were such lovely guys. But the mistake was giving it to them while they were still on the clock, because they partied all night, they drained these bottles, and the next morning they were so hungover that they basically passed my partner and I the keys to their van and said, "You drive." And they pointed us across the Gobi Desert in one direction and said, "Keep going." Again, we had the time of our lives. We really enjoyed it. But
you did actually drive them, did you?
Oh, God, yeah. We had no choice. No? It was either that or get back to Ulaanbaatar a couple days too late for our flights. The scenery is gorgeous. There's a vastness to Mongolia that I find intoxicating. It's just a wonderful, wonderful place. So my impression is, my God, I wish I was going with you. It really is. It's one of those places you feel like you can still have an adventure. You can truly still get lost in the best possible way. I mean, really out of the ordinary. You're in for a treat.
Out of the ordinary. Ah, yes. I think I could spend the rest of my life doing out of the ordinary very happily. I think of this podcast in that respect as well, you know. Barnes, you can't come, I'm afraid. I'm a bit fearful that if you did, one of those majestic eagles might think you're a furry fox and deliver you to the table to be made into a stew. So yes, you're right to look the other way and throw your doggy passport in the pond. And I have the most beautiful piece of music as the play-out song today. It is an absolute taste of Mongolia. If musically you can have that, I think you can. And I shut my eyes when I heard this song originally. It's just hypnotic, it's beautiful. It's something that, obviously don't shut your eyes if you're driving. Find a place, pull over, and listen to it that way. But the music just beautifully washed right through me. So if you can shut your eyes when you hear it today, perfect. As I say, if you're driving, pull over. If you're at work, go and sit in the janitor's cleaning product cupboard so you don't look like you're falling asleep on the job. But that is to come. And I'm sorry, Barnes. No, you can't come. I'm ever so sorry. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, absolutely not. No. Right, a letter. And then, yes, we'll join David once more. This one is from Kelvin Brown, self-described bloke with a camera. And the letter even has a title. I love letters with titles. This one is called Strangers. And it's wonderfully about encounters, another of our favourite pastimes on the show. On numerous occasions, says Kelvin, I've heard street photographers tell us to make a connection with somebody. Then, if they're amenable, make an image. In the past, I've come across situations where I've been talking to members of the public, but I just couldn't cross that line to ask to take a photograph. One occasion, a chap was sitting on a park bench with his small dog in his lap. He was smoking a pipe, had a very, very characterful beard. We chatted actually for 2 minutes, but I just could not sum up the courage to ask for a photo. But I was walking through Boston, the one in England, and I thought I'd share this story of success. I found myself with a spare 30 minutes or so, took some images of the town and came across a chap who was feeding pigeons while they sat on his hands. I walked on by at first, but intrigue got the better of me, and I said, "No, turn around, Kelvin," and asked to take a shot. He's feeding pigeons while they're sitting on and next to his hands. Surely he'll be okay with me taking a couple of pictures. I gestured with my camera. He nodded and said in accented English, "Yes, okay." So here are 2 of the 3 pictures. Hopefully I can now improve my street portrait count. Feeling chuffed, Kelvin Brown, a bloke with a camera. Kelvin, I love them. I do. I love them. And they are on the show page, as you would expect. And you've also reminded me to share something that I've been trying of late. I think it's subtle. I'm hoping you won't think, what? But here goes. It starts with the word vulnerability. And how if that's used in the proper way, an authentic way. I'm always very careful about using the word authentic, because there's a great amount of vulnerability when asking for a portrait. That's true. It can actually be your superpower, though, I think. This superpower, I believe, is wrapped up in 3 words. Those 3 words are, with the right inquisition as well in your voice. Would you mind? It's a small group of words. I grant you that, but I think they carry a lot of weight. Would you mind? Not a demanding, would you mind? Would you mind? Because it doesn't assume, it doesn't barge in. It sort of asks to be let in, gently. And that, I think, is the very human bit. I told you it's subtle. Because when you say it, what you're really doing is you're offering them the choice to be seen or to be heard. You're not just asking to take a photograph. Can I take a photo? It's, would you mind? It's that permission, beautiful permission that you're asking for. You're asking for a moment of trust, I suppose, and that empowers the person that you're asking. I'm not guaranteeing that, of course, everybody will say yes, far from it. But we do live in a world where people are so used to having things taken, their time, their attention, and yes, their image, without any real invitation. So, would you mind? Kind of slows the whole thing down, I think. It's a verbal open hand or open hands. It says, I see you, and I'd like to share this moment, but only if you're happy to let me. Go on, pups, in there. Look, some water. Go on. Come on, it's so hot. Anyway, just my 2 pennyworth on the subject. Super pictures, Kelvin. They are on the show page. Right. Part 2 of my chat with David duChemin. We are going to start with what I think must be one of the hardest decisions you could possibly make in your life. Not just in a physical sense, certainly in a mental sense as well. Here's part 2, the concluding part of my conversation with David duChemin.
David, you've been through serious physical challenges in your life, and photographically, of course, that's made a difference, including your accident in Italy and the amputation in 2023. So one's 2011, isn't it? One's 2023.
That's right.
Well, first of all, perhaps I should ask how it happened, how the 2 realities have made a difference to your life.
Yeah, what happened is so much does in my life. It started with me trying for a photograph, or rather scouting a photograph. So we were in Pisa, and it was the first day of a workshop, and I was with a group of students, and we had our dinner, and we were sitting by the river Arno that snakes its way through Pisa. And the river is quite low relative to street level. It turns out it's almost exactly 30 feet lower, or 10 meters lower than street level. And we were sitting, and I was looking and paying attention to other things. And I thought, if I could just get a little lower, these walls, rather than shooting down on the line of the river, these walls would sort of give me an interesting POV. And I looked down, and there was a bit of a ledge there, and I thought, well, if I just hop down, I didn't even want to make the photograph. The light was not, it was just all sort of nighttime street light. But I thought, first thing in the morning, this could be really beautiful. So I hopped down to this ledge. I set my camera on where I was sitting, and I hopped down to the ledge, and somewhere between hopping down and hitting the ground 10 meters below, I missed my footing, or I landed, but I twisted my ankle. I'm not really sure. It happened very quickly. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to make it. It felt felt long. I had been a rock climber in a previous life as a young man, and 30 feet. So that's 10 meters is a good drop. Without ropes or anything, I thought this is gonna hurt. Fortunately, it all happened so very quickly, but I shattered both of my feet and I cracked my pelvis, and very fortunately, nothing else. Had I been sitting there and fallen backwards, that same 10-meter drop would have killed me. And it turns out, this was Easter weekend, and it turns out that in the 4 months leading up to this, there had already been 3 people killed. I was the 4th that fell and the only one that lived.
Goodness.
And I ended up in the hospital for 4 days in Italy before I was evacuated back to Canada, and had multiple surgeries and, the whole recovery thing. Very quickly went into a rehab facility. And when I was checked in, I remember them saying, well, give us a little bit of time, and in a few days, the doctor will come by and talk to you about when foreseeably you might be discharged. And I said, well, I know when I am going to be discharged. And they said, oh, have you seen the doctor? I said, no, I've talked to my travel agent. And they were very confused. I said, well, I have a trip to Laos and Cambodia in 4 weeks. So I need to, get going on this.
Good Lord.
And I went to Laos and Cambodia, and I hobbled around the rice paddies with a cane it was a telescoping cane that kept getting stuck. And when you pulled it open, the shock cord inside it would expand, and then the whole cane would collapse. And it was a very poor choice of tools for the job. I went to Antarctica after that and started sort of this slow recovery with more surgeries to rectify. And it never, the long story short is it never quite healed. And over time, all the compensations that my body did started to make things difficult for me. Arthritis started to set in quite seriously. And I got to the point where my surgeon finally said, look, we've done everything we can. This is as good as it gets. And those have always been fighting words for me. As good as it gets is something I'm very unwilling just to sort of take someone else's word on.
Yeah.
And parallel to that, I have a very good friend who's a below-the-knee amputee, as I am now. And he was running half marathons and riding his bike and scuba diving. I used to joke that, he would swim circles around me. He used to joke that that's because he only had one leg and that's all he could do was swim circles. He handled his amputation, and his happened as a teenager. He handled it with such grace and humor, but if we were hiking, he could pass me easily. And I thought, well, hang on a sec. If he is this capable with a prosthetic, surely that's an option for me. And so I asked my surgeon, I said, do some people choose to have their foot removed? And I sort of saw it as a recycle program, and could I upgrade this to carbon fiber and stainless steel? And she said, yeah, some people do choose that. She kind of left the conversation there. I could sense that she wasn't ready for the conversation, or she felt I wasn't. And about 2 years later, I went back in and I said, we've got to do it. I need a little more information. We had some talks, and I signed on a piece of paper and said, take it from here. My biggest fear going into it was not that it wouldn't go well. It was that she was going to say no, or that I was going to wake up with this foot still attached. Maybe it's my pragmatic nature, but I just couldn't see hanging on to this thing if it was going to hold me back. If I was going to spend more time on a couch over, I'm 53 now, so I was 50 at the time I was sort of signing off on this amputation. And I could see very clearly that my life was going to take one of two trajectories. I was either going to spend more and more time on the couch, not doing the things I loved, or I was going to have to do something that was fairly dramatic. And I'm pleased to say the gamble paid off. It has been nothing but a success. I'm at the gym doing 2-foot box jumps, and I'm doing things I haven't done for 12 years. I'm hiking further and more comfortably. It's taken a little while. It's a little weird to, have a foot that's not your foot. Very handy. Doesn't get cold. Doesn't hurt when I kick the coffee table. But so there are some strong advantages. You spend half as much money on socks. There is a profound silver lining to this. But if I was to have kept the foot I was born with, it wouldn't have served me. It has been tough. The phantom limb pain, Neil, it is nothing to be trifled with. I was told going into this, you may experience some phantom limb pain. I was not told anything about the nature of it. And it is fascinating. It is surreal. It is incredibly painful. It's like the only analogy I've come up with is sort of my brain is making a series of phone calls to my foot. And my foot is not answering, and so my brain's leaving a series of increasingly hostile voice messages. Pick up, I know you're there. And that for the first couple of months was profoundly difficult. It was incredibly painful.
Has it gone now?
No, I have flare-ups. I have days where I just, I'll be. Mostly it happens when I'm inactive, when I'm passive. If I'm at the gym, it doesn't bother me. If I'm hiking, it doesn't bother me. But if I am sitting, especially without my prosthesis on, it will, every now and then I get a day that's just really, I tell Cynthia, it's just zappy. It's a very electrical, shocking, stabbing kind of pain. But when you know it's not harming you, it hurts. The sensation is there, and it really truly feels like it's very specific. It feels like someone is shocking my big toe or my little toe or my heel, or it's very, very specific. But I know it's not harming me. I know that it's just an electrical impulse. I know it's just nerves doing what nerves do, and you can a little bit separate yourself from it. Go, oh, that's very interesting how much that particular sensation hurt right now, because there's no fear associated with it. You know that it's not harming you. Yes, it hurts. Yes, kind of every now and then I sort of say a very bad word out of nowhere with no context, and Cynthia's like, so a bit of a zappy day today. Yeah. But for me, this has been such a small downside to an otherwise very life-giving decision.
It's an extraordinary story. I can see it's also for your stage presentations, giving you lots of material, such as the sock. And
it's good stuff. There's a good comedian. There's nothing you can't laugh at. If there's something you can't laugh at, give it some time. You'll come around.
You can't take the comedian out of a once comedian.
That's true.
That's for sure. I'm changing the subject entirely now. You're a prolific writer. Tell me about the book process. It seems natural that you should, because of the places you were going, the things you were seeing, the animals you were photographing. So it seems a natural process.
Yeah, it for me it is. It's as natural as photography, which is, I don't think, natural to begin with. But right about the same time I picked up a camera, I started journaling. And I have been journaling and writing since I was 14. Maybe not as a daily discipline all the time, but certainly it's been a discipline that I have held very close for most of my life. And again, I think it's an observational mechanism. I think sitting and writing and being aware of your thoughts and your feelings, even just here's what happened today. And as you write that, realizing that you're thinking thoughts you didn't know you were thinking. I often will write something and go, oh, I didn't know I knew that. It just came out. And someone wiser than me once said, we write in order to discover what we're thinking. And that very much is true for me. When I sit and write, I will, at the beginning of the process, and there are strong parallels with photography. At the beginning of the process, I'm thinking, where do I even start? I don't have anything to say. What am I, and you put a few words down. I usually start with, I would like to write a piece about this, about courage, about, f-stops, I don't know, depth of field versus depth of feeling. Some just thing has come to, and I will write. And by the time I have finished, I will look at that finished piece. Maybe it's 2 hours later, maybe it's 3 days later, whatever. I will look at that finished draft and often will think, I had no idea it was going this way. I had no idea I thought that way. That's a perspective I never considered. And sometimes, in fact, often, the thing that I wrote at the beginning, that first paragraph gets deleted. That was my start. I wrote a book called Start Ugly that is about this very thing. It's about the fact that every creative process begins with a very rough idea, and you need to be willing to go through a number of iterations. There's a book called Bird by Bird by a writer named Anne Lamott, who calls them shitty first drafts. And I think it's absolutely true, not just of writing, but everything in our life. When you put a camera to your face, very rarely is that first frame the frame that you're going to select in the consequent edit. It's going to be further down the way when you find all of the things that make that scene, when you turn a little and, okay, that's the way I need to be facing for the light, and I need to be down a little lower. And this is not a 35 millimeter scene. This is a 85 millimeter or 24 millimeter scene. I need to wait for it. You go through all these iterations, all the while your monkey brain chattering, going, you have no idea what you're doing. This isn't working. This is stupid. You should, where's the whiskey? But then you get to this moment where you go, oh, hang on a sec. Something's where, oh, I like that. Oh, this is good. Oh, not that. It's messy. It's iterative, but you get to the end and go, I had none of the pictures I have taken did I visualize in my head the way that, Ansel Adams once talks about pre-visualization, and I read this, and I'm like, I have no idea what he's going on about, because it's never worked like that for me. In part because I'm never in front of a landscape with my camera on a tripod in an unmoving, very static circumstance. But also because my creative process is messy and iterative and evolutionary. And I think that's true of every creative process. I also think it's true of life. Every effort I'm making right now, I'm making a rig that I can float an underwater housing on the surface of the water that will, because of the big glass dome in front of it, it will see, they call it a split. An over-under. So you have, in my wildest dreams, it is a bear eating salmon on the top half of the frame, and on the bottom half of the frame, the rest of the bear in the water. Who's to know? But this started with an idea, and it sat in my notebooks, and I thought, oh, this is too much work. It's not going to work. And I had to overcome all of the voices, and then, well, I have no idea how to do this. And it's incredibly iterative. And when we're done here, I'll go up and cut some aluminum and drill some holes and continue my exploration of how to build this ridiculous. It's the ugliest thing I've ever made, Neil. It's awful. But it's getting there. And if you are discouraged by the first efforts, if you judge what will become the final effort by how ugly those first efforts are, how tentative they are, how nervous we are, or scared about their success, it will sabotage the very process that we need to get to that final thing. And with any luck, at the end of this year, I will have some work that will probably look very different than what I have in my mind's eye, but it begins kind of ugly. And so going all the way back to that's, I think the writing every day has given me an ability to embrace that process. I think because I'm writing so much, I'm fairly aware of it. And because my job is articulating some of these thoughts and helping others kind of grapple with them, I've got to a spot where the messiness of the process is less frightening to me and more sort of, it's just part of the price we pay, and you slog through it, and you're digging through dirt to find the gems, right? And you're like, oh, okay, that's just a piece of dirt. That's just more dirt. But when you get to that one little, you're like, okay, this is enough evidence that there's something in here that I should keep digging. I find it very rewarding.
I'm trying to unpick through your answer there whether you make photographs, write, or make photographs in particular now in terms of the context of what you were just talking about, whether you're making them for you or whether you're making them for an audience that clearly respect and enjoy the work that you make. Do you feel a pressure to create in a particular way because of audience expectation? I suppose that comes full circle really to something we talked about before when we touched on social media.
There is a pressure, but that pressure is not, I think, now, and realize, of course, that who you are after 40 years of practicing a craft and how you practice it and how you feel about it and engage it will be different than when you first start out. There is some benefit to the years and all the, the traumas and the difficulties and realizing how resilient you can be. The benefit is I know that my best work comes when, yes, I'm aware that people will see my photographs. Yes, I'm aware that I want them to feel a certain way. And if you are going to use language, you need to be mindful of it because others will experience it. And so you want to be as clear and as compelling as you can. But my best work is always done when I acknowledge that, but don't let it drive what I'm doing. My hope is for that next photograph that makes me profoundly giddy, because the photograph may not work out. And so if I have affected my process with this awareness of, what does the audience want? I will end up with photographs that neither they nor I particularly care for. And that's the worst case scenario. But if you can begin with the idea that you are your own first audience, and that if you make work purely to delight yourself, purely to scratch your own itch, to engage whatever questions you have, if you are faithful to that, there will be an audience that you don't have to make work your audience likes. Your audience will either like or not like or resonate with the work that you make. Your audience will self-filter. It will always change. I'm quite sure there were people that loved my humanitarian work that have kind of moved on to other photographers because they're not really into bears. That's fine. I happen to be really into bears and rhinos right now. I'm not going to change that affection and that desire for that exploration for them. I think there's enough similarities between the work that I think many people have stayed with me. But sometimes an artist changes their voice. And look at not to compare myself, but look at the career of Picasso, who had various stages and phases. And I don't think he reinvented himself, but he found new means of expression with some frequency in his work. And I don't think that there's anything. I think I would rather be in that camp than in the camp that's always going, okay, now, but what is the trend now? What does my audience want now? That's a moving target that no one can hit for very long. And how dissatisfied and how forgive me for putting it this way, but how schizophrenic would the work feel if you were constantly chasing, this new visual trend or, the thing that gets likes on Instagram. I think that is, I'm less interested that my photographs are good, Neil, and I'm more interested that they are truly my own. And that's kind of the voice that I have when I teach photography. Defining a good photograph is almost objectively impossible in a way that universally would be accepted. But as a photographer, when you've made work that fits, that's you. And that's the thing that I try to accomplish for myself, is something that when I get done, I'm like, yeah, that feels right.
Well, talking of moments, and I'm not going to ask what's your favourite picture, because if I did, I'd want you to feed me to one of those bears in your beautiful pictures, or indeed throw me in front of, I think it was the black rhino that has the more of a moody issue, wasn't it? Not the white rhino.
Yeah, black rhinos are a little fussy.
Yeah, but there must have been a moment across this wonderful career so far that's reminded you exactly why you do what you do. It might actually be a moment to come. It could well be that wonderful housing you're about to work on in the next few minutes that sees a bear half in and half out of water. I don't know.
It's funny, Neil. I sign the bottom of my the emails that I send out, and at the end of my books, I for my audience of photographers, I always write for the love of the photograph. But increasingly, I've been discontent. I've been self-aware as I've written that, because I'm actually. The photograph is so important, and I do love photographs, but they are rather ephemeral in the sense that as an artifact that represents how I see the world, how I experience the world, they don't last very long. The picture that is the greatest photograph I've ever made in the moment will, in a year from now, if I am growing, if I'm evolving as a photographer and someone who's experiencing the world and making honest, courageous decisions, I will make work then that I look back on this work now and go, it was at the time, it was an important thing for me to do, and it was good, and it was honest and beautiful. But our work, I think, is always evolving, in lockstep with who we are becoming as people. And so it really is the next image, the next experience, that pursuit of that image, right? It's not so much for the love of the photograph as for the love of the exploration that just leads me to making the photograph. It's the process. It's the being alive. We cannot ignore the fact that one day, and as someone who's 53-ish. A lot of my audience looks at me as, that young kid. But even if we make it to 85, 90, I had a man write a comment on my blog yesterday that he said, I'm 97 years old and I'm still learning. And I thought, oh my God, 97 years old. How amazing that he's still learning and engaged. And I hope if I make it that far that I'm doing the same. But at some point, we all will run out of room. We will run out of time. And it will not be to the sharpest photograph to which we look back and say, oh, that's, that was the highlight of my life, was one, award that I won, or this one body of work. I don't think that the stuff that we put on our websites, I can speak for myself. I will not be looking back at those photographs as my blue ribbon or the thing that gives me meaning. I will be looking at the experiences that those photographs represent. And probably a lot of really bad photographs on my iPhone of the people that I love and the memories that I have that I would never show to anyone except those people. Those are the things that are going to be memorable and meaningful, and the experiences that are worth chasing, and overcoming the fear of the imposter syndrome and the comparison with others and our fear of whatever it is that we are afraid of. It will be those risks taken and experiences lived and stories that we have. Those will be the important things. So it is always to that next thing that I'm looking as an experience. The photographs pull me forward into that, the possibility that, the picture could be. But I know very well that when I'm a year beyond making that amazing photograph, I'll look back and go, but I won't look back at the experience with the same flippancy. I hope I will look back at the experience and go, God, wasn't that amazing? Wasn't it incredible that we could experience that moment and feel that wonder? And whether it's in front of a rhino or a bear or another culture or, the coffee shop or the bar around the corner that you like to photograph in, my adventure will be so different than anyone else's. But that we have the adventure, that to me is where the magic is. That's where we find the wonder. These cameras just happen to be sort of the carrot hanging from the stick for me.
There's a piece of me now that's going to kick myself, because really that should be the end of the interview. But my other listener, as I refer to my other listener, knows that there has to be another question to come. Because this is the, and I know you're going to answer this very, very well. No pressure, obviously. I'm looking forward to two things, actually. Well, three things. You're returning to do 3 more stops, which is great. The second thing is I'm looking for, because I've signed up for the contact sheet, and I'll make sure I leave a link to that so others can as well. And then I'm looking forward to your answer to this. David, what is your why? What is it that makes you do this? I think you may have answered it slightly. I'm a little bit fearful that you have, but I think there's more. I do think there's more.
Wonder. I think it's wonder, and those that know me will be shocked that I have resisted the urge to be much more eloquent and use many more words. But I think I have said it, and I think it's the experience of wonder, the experiencing of something bigger, larger than myself. Going all the way back to my days in theology school, I largely departed from the form of that faith, but I haven't stopped looking for something transcendent, the wonder, the mystery, the thing that is bigger than I am. And I would sum it up with wonder, whether you're looking at a blade of grass, through a macro lens or a rhino or an elephant. God, there's just so much beauty, and we are a very inwardly focused culture. Maybe it's the antidote to that is the wonder. It pulls me out of myself, and it's bigger feelings, bigger experiences, bigger stories, and probably all wrapped up in that one word.
My thanks to David duChemin today. My sincere thanks. It was an absolute privilege, David, talking with you. There'll be links on the show page today to David's work. There'll be some pictures as well, of course, on that show page. And that is it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a little bit further together, well, I'd love to share your company. We have a program called The Extra Mile. It's for our patrons, and we're up to 141. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. And the wonderful thing about the show is that our community members are often the stars, as you will find out today. This week, Extra Miler Ricky Paul Bunda joins me for part 2 of his story. I have some thoughts to share about building an audience from a letter I received. Some self-reflection is in there as well, actually, when I give you my feelings about building an audience. And David, yes, he's got his final appearance just for the moment. Just one more thing. He is back to face 3 more stops. So here is a taster of what is waiting for you on this very special Extra Mile today.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I love the idea of finding beauty in the mundane, like finding beauty in the normal, in the boring. I always get in trouble with my wife on holidays in Prague, and we're walking down to Charles Bridge early in the morning, and absolutely that city is one of the most gorgeous cities in the world. And I'm obsessed, like the water's running down, it's been raining, and there's a leaf caught in the gutter, and it's like flickering and the light's coming off it, and I've got my camera there, and she's just like, seriously, you're in the most beautiful city, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and you're looking at this little leaf struggling in the water.
We've always had this conversation in my home. When enough drinks have been had, we have the superpower conversation. And some people want to be invisible, and I have always said I would like to speak and understand every language on earth. I think that would give me the ability to connect with any human being. as much as language facilitates that. I'd love to be able to speak to the animals and understand them and communicate with them.
So if you'd like to start listening to these Extra Mile shows, I'd be delighted for you to join me on these walks. Go to the website, photowalk.show, and follow the link that says Extra Mile, or also the orange support button, top right-hand corner. That will take you to the same page. And you can read all about it. Read all about it. Join us. You can listen to the first 5 minutes of the show for free as well. A mention too for our monthly live In Vision Zoom show, which is part of the Extra Mile. It's happening, if you're listening to this on the day it's released, as I say, it's happening this coming Tuesday. Look forward to talking to you in the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere. Our PS to the show is to come, but before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to, or think about what's been said by our guests through the letters, the things that you've heard. And, oh my word, what a treat. I am going to play you something deeply haunting, I think, from Mongolia. We are likely to hear something like this when we travel, certainly in on or near the temples. Now, during this song, and you'll know it when it happens, there will be some Mongolian throat singing. And I believe this is the closed eyes bit, by the way. It is one of the most mesmerizing sounds that you'll ever hear. It's a single voice producing two, sometimes as many as three, I'm not quite sure how this happens, tones at once. A low earthly drone, a haunting whistle-like melody, all at the same time. The technique requires years of practice, tuning the body like an instrument, they say, shaping sound not just with the mouth but with the chest and the throat and, it's said, the very bones of a body. I tried in the privacy of the shower to do it. I just sounded like I was in pain, frankly. So I'd like you to, and I'm going to get poetic now, travel on the wind with me to a place far away. This is a song called Gobi, the story of the weeping camel. Gobi, the story of the weeping camel. And that's it for this photo walk as we've walked together along the path, making some pictures, listening to our wonderful guests and getting excited, well I am, about the launch of The Journey Beyond. And if you'd like to learn more about that particular trip, because there's a full itinerary on the website, go to thejourneybeyond.uk. It is linked via the photowalk.show homepage as well, so you will be able to jump straight through from that page as well. You'll see it up there, Mongolia 26. It'll say. I think that the trip will fill up reasonably quickly. I certainly hope it does. So I'm looking forward to spending time with you. Just a few closing thoughts before the postscript today. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We'll keep building this wonderful community of kindness in the photographic and walking world together, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do, making pictures and walking together. A few mentions for those who smooth the voyage for me. Neil Ford, who looks after IT. Honestly, if it flashes, buzzes, or there's wires connected to anything, don't trust me, trust Neil. Andrea Gilpin, who keeps a watchful eye over Instagram, as does Kelly Mitchell for Facebook, and to Michael Mixon, who helps with show research. Write a postscript for the show. I would like to take something from Anthony Bourdain, who left us far too early. He was an American chef, a traveller. I'm going to say he was an intrigued human. He was certainly intrigued about humanity and his travel shows. I never watched them, but now I know about him, I certainly intend to. And he said this about travel, and I think travel is a good sign-off for the show today. Travel, said Anthony, travel changes you. As you move through this life and this world, you leave marks behind, however small. And in return, life and travel leaves marks on you. Come on, pups. This way. Come on. Let's go find the cafe. Should we go find the cafe? Yes. Oh, don't get spooked. That was just a tree in the wind, creaking.
What's there to hold in the light of this moon? My mind keeps searching, but my heart decides. Thoughts can be cruel, they're not mine to hold. The space unravels when you let go.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.